Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. On We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South, in Mississippi, with a population of about 3 million people, of which 40 to 45% are African Americans. You know, one time in Mississippi, there were more African Americans than there were Europeans. We're close to that margin again as the African American population continues to grow. It continues to grow all over the world. You know, it's been difficult here in Mississippi, but yet we achieve, we rise, we populate, and we do great work down in Mississippi. And so we're broadcasting live. If you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to send us stars and share this program with your friends and family. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform, then we want you to hit the donate button, because it's tremendously important that you help us finance this great journey that we're on. We're the only African-American owned and operated broadcast studio in the state of Mississippi, and not many throughout the entire Southeast region. So it's critically important that we add to the narrative, that we don't let others control the narrative, and because when we do, that's when we get lost. We lose sight on who we are, where we come from, and what it is we're supposed to be doing. Now, so this broadcast station is designed for African Americans. This podcast studio is available to you anytime you would like to share your word, your message with the listening audience. We've been seen all over the world in over 139 countries. That's all over the world. So take advantage of this great resource that you have right here in your community. Now, the difference between WeBelieveDigital.com and other platforms like Facebook and Instagram, etc., or some of our local TV stations like WLBT TV, etc., is that WeBelieveDigital.com can have at least 100, if we choose, programs running live at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning or any other day during the week, because we have a pro platform that's specifically designed to allow multiple channels to play at the same time. You know, on Sunday morning on the local news media, you can only watch one pastor that comes on at 8 o'clock, and normally that's going to be Joel Osteen, or somebody like that with the big bucks. But you're not going to get a chance to hear Pastor Jenkins, Thomas Jenkins, a great orator down in Jackson, Mississippi. You're not going to hear Bishop Dwayne Pickett over at New Jerusalem Church, and you're not going to hear Bishop Ronnie Crudup at New Horizon Church. You can watch all three of those on Sunday morning live on WeBelieveDigital.com. So you see, we're different, and we want to be different. And we recently added to our asset pool a internet radio station. So now you can listen to your favorite music, easy listening at We Believe Radio. You go to our website, WeBelieveDigital.com, and you scroll down until you see We Believe Radio. You click on We Believe Radio, and you can listen to music 24 hours a day. Most of it is commercial free. Some of the best songs that you'll ever want to hear. Easy listening is what I call it. So you see, we are a multi-channel, multi-discipline platform that we bring you broadcast shows, we bring you live podcast shows, we bring you some pre-recorded information, we remote you in from wherever you are in the world to join our shows. We are multi-talented and multi-discipline media platform. When you're tired of listening at the We Believe Internet digital radio station, just check the schedule and see when we're going to be broadcasting live. So it's important. We're here for you. We need your patronage, we need your confidence, and we need your prayers as we continue this journey to be one of the best media outlets in the South. It's no surprise to me that we will launch from Mississippi because, quite frankly, so many things have come out of Mississippi that have been good. So many marvelous people that have achieved. It's the birthplace of the blues. You know, if Mississippi would invest in its rich heritage, be it negative in points, in times, be that so, if we would invest in our diversity, then we would be the tourism capital of the world. God has strategically placed us along the mighty Mississippi River, with the Pearl River flowing down through our city. Interstate 55 and Interstate 20 intersect in Jackson, Mississippi. So you see, we are a garden spot. If you're considering moving south, consider Jackson, Mississippi. If you are African American and consider moving south, then you definitely ought to consider Jackson, Mississippi. Why? Because we need your talent. We need your brain power. We need all of the experiences that you have gathered wherever you're coming from. And you need to come in here and help us make a difference and move Mississippi forward. We need to move it from last to first. You know, it can be done. We recently saw how simple it was when Jackson State University hired Coach Deion Sanders to come in and coach the football team. The football team was 0-11 or 1-11, had a miserable season and had losing streaks for some years. Within 2 years, he built a program into a championship, a national champion, having only lost in the Fiesta Bowl over in Atlanta. And so it can be done. One person, one man, one woman can make a difference. So we need you to come on home, come back. Come on back where it all started. Come back to ground zero. Yes, there are some difficult times ahead in Mississippi. I know you're watching the national news, and you see us all over the place having drinking water problems, road infrastructure problems. You know, we're not doing well in health care. So there are issues, there are problems, but all problems can be solved. Now, the gentleman that is my co-host has spoken about solutions to problems all of his life. Now, he's a renowned orator, and he has come a mighty long ways from his days on the plantation up in the Mississippi Delta to where he is today, and he is known as Dr. Eldridge Henderson. He has a weekly radio show on Thursday evening for 1 hour, and then on Tuesday mornings he has a 30-minute show on WMPR radio station. 100,000 watts of radio power that's also operated by African Americans. You see, in Mississippi, we still run a few things. We still strive to be independent. We still want to rebuild our communities. We want to have our own independent schools. We want to demonstrate once again that if you take your foot off our necks, that we will build a marvelous society, as we have done in the past. Now, Dr. Henderson, it's always good to have you in the studio, and welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Socrates. I'm always proud to be here because I learn a lot, and when you learn a lot, you can share a lot.
Wow.
And I don't mind sharing. I tell what I know every time with solutions.
Does that get you in trouble?
It does, and I like it. I enjoy it.
You're like,
I just enjoyed when someone pulled me aside and started criticizing me for telling the truth. And they say many times, well, we know it's true, but you just shouldn't expose it to the public. Say things are going to get better. I've been hearing that for a long time. Long time. Things don't get better if you hide the facts in the sand. If you have a determination to do something and you let people persuade you not to do so. Matter of fact, you're supposed to do more when they start criticizing, and that's why I have a show called Organize, Don't Criticize the Human Enemies of Mankind. They are there all over the world. They're pervasive. And if you allow them to do things, and all you do is criticize them, I guarantee you, you won't be able to organize. But you organize, pool your resources, and collectively determine your destiny in areas where you're in the majority. Your enemies will start loving you because they will see, Mr. Socrates, that you're so independent, you're doing so well economically, until they will invite you to come and sit at the table with them.
Now, Doc, you classify something as a human enemy of mankind. Oh, explain about how do you come up with that?
Well, that's a historical fact. There are certain things you can Google on your computer. Enemies of mankind. The human enemies of mankind. The female enemies of mankind. And you will see a lot of names, institutions, and other entities that will come up. Sometimes natural problems, we call them nature, that's going bad, that man creates to cause things to happen. And all of these things that we have been talking about for years are man-created enemies that destroy us politically, economically, socially, leadership-wise, and it's causing a lot of mental unwellness among all the people throughout the world, and especially in the South, with more emphasis on black folks, because we have an absence of leadership in the black community by design, and we don't do anything about it other than criticize the people that have the opportunity to solve the problem. And why would black people think the person that is causing the problem is going to solve it, even if they can do it financially? Why would a crazy person like that think the enemy that wants you to die, want you to work hard and make the minimum wage or less, want you to have a broken family, and can solve all of those problems, including give you health and wellness, and won't do it, and have billions of dollars to do it? Why would you think those folks will help you? So that's why you have to organize. Stop criticizing.
Now, Doc, Mississippi has more African American elected officials than any place else in the country. And yet you said there's an absence of leadership. That seems like an oxymoron. How can you have more elected officials than anywhere else in the country and have an absence of leadership?
Well, it's because the leadership is chosen by special interests. They're not chosen by the so-called people. If you look at the statistics and the voting records of the folks in Mississippi, and I'm specifically talking about black folks, and we have done so. We have looked at it precinct by precinct in the counties. And statewide, you will find that black folks vote less than the so-called few Native Americans that we have. We vote in some precincts 13%. The highest I've seen recently was 33%. So that means around 70+% of the people that's registered to vote not even voted. Now, I'm not talking about all those that are not registered. That's why we had good leadership in the black community, a new candidate that's almost unknown that will organize 6 months before he announced he's going to run and go and find out where the people live that's registered and not voting, plus those that are not registered and can't vote, and organize those folks, keep himself quiet, and make an announcement they could win against an incumbent without a runoff in any county where the blacks are 40 to 45%. And this can be done anytime, in any state.
Now, Doc, we got to take ownership for our own problems.
That's
now, some say that blacks lost their children, they lost their resources. We had magnificent communities. We all remember Black Wall Street, etc. And we're going to deal with history a little bit because, quite frankly, history is not taught in the public school system. So African American children don't have any idea what their history really is, where they come from, what their achievements were, or anything like that. And so we have what you have described in the past, and I need you to share it with our audience, that we have a new man. And somewhere along the line, this new man was created, and he is completely void or absent of any legacy or any history that he holds on to.
Well, that's a fact. And Mr. Socrates, this is getting worse. With this new man and this new interest in putting the cover over history in this state, in the South, and in the nation, the black people are going to have less opportunity psychologically to want to do anything to develop themselves because they think they're all right. You made a good point. We have more black elected officials than any state, covering all kinds of positions except on the state level. We have a lot of people going to school, but they're doing less well than the average person in any other state, including the southern states. We have a good population, a lot of space, but our people are sick. We have a lot of people, young people, 5 years old and up, that are obese. We have all kinds of young people that are not doing anything in school because they're not challenged. And we also have a lot of senior citizens, and I did a research study on that a few weeks ago. They are getting worse in America, and especially in the South. They're living longer, they are more sick than they were 2 or 3 years ago, and more than one would believe have serious financial problems. So many of them, and I have relatives like that, are deciding whether they're going to buy medicine or buy food. And then when they buy food, they have to get the lowest quality of food they can find.
Now, Doc, some have described some areas in the South as being food deserts. Now, that's hard for me to imagine because as a boy, I could always go to the garden. We had potatoes and those old Indian teepees that we kept all winter long. We had fruits, fig trees, and all kinds of pecan orchards. We had everything that you needed to live on, and it was healthy right at our fingertips.
That's correct.
But today...
And look at you now.
Yeah.
You're still alive.
Yeah.
You're not overweight.
Yeah.
And you probably had that good food for about the first 30 years of your life. I had good food the first 20 years of my life. We didn't have any money, but we had all those things you just mentioned. But imagine, the young people now, from 45 down, have not had a good meal, nutritional meal, many of them in their lives. They don't eat anything at home of any significance. And when they do eat, they don't eat with that family unit there that will promote love and good nutrition, because when the mother and the father are there with the children, mothers that are halfway adequate are going to do their best to feed the kids well. They're going to talk about things in the family and other things in the community that help them understand each other and the community. That promotes that bondness. But now, since we don't eat together, we don't know each other, my husbands don't know the wife and vice versa. They know nothing about what the kids are doing in school, so therefore they can't help them. And the kids are running wild because of lack of leadership in their home, and then it's worse on the outside because they don't have role models to see in politics and in the churches that will give a good role model and example. So they're getting worse, killing each other day and night, and they're getting younger.
Now, Doc, we're going to have to come up with some solutions for that.
Exactly.
I mean, you and I are at a point where we've seen enough to know that we can solve this problem.
Every one of those problems I just mentioned could be solved, and they can get started in 30, 60, 90 days with solutions. I have talked about it for years, but most people don't want to do it until later. They tell me it's not time yet. And the so-called anti-integrationists used to tell black folks the same thing. Just wait, it's not time yet. You shouldn't be demonstrating. You shouldn't be marching at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. You shouldn't be begging the politicians to give you a chance to vote. Just wait. Let things cool down. Tell those outside agitators to leave, and we'll give you some consideration.
What is a social integrator? What kind of term was that you just articulated? The individuals that are holding the line for the enemy that are in place, is that traditionally called the middle class?
That's the middle class, and specifically those that have been given a crown. For instance, they are appointed to good positions by their friends who got in public office on the local and regional level. You know, we don't have any statewide blacks. And usually when the black leadership hires or promotes someone, it's usually their friends, their relatives, and you better not have a college degree and have sorority and fraternity friends. They will come and get a job, for instance, in zoning with a degree in physical education. You might put one in finance, and all he or she ever achieved in school was a degree in sociology, that kind of crazy stuff. And then when they get funds, they don't manage them properly. They don't allocate them because they haven't had the training to do it and didn't have enough gumption to go on the computer and use Google and find out how to manage and lead and allocate and delegate their responsibilities to those that can do better if they can't do it themselves.
We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the top 50 most influential blacks in the state of Mississippi. Now, you're watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American owned and operated studio. If you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to send us stars and share this program with your friends and family. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching us on We Believe digital platform, hit the donate button and share this program with your friends and families. Now, we got a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about the top most influential blacks in Mississippi when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American owned and operated broadcast studio. We're being seen all over the world in over 139 countries. You can find us on Facebook. And if you do watch us on Facebook, share this program with your friends and families. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to us. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform, then we want you to hit the donate button. Help us finance this journey so that we can control, at least make certain that the narrative is positioned correctly. Make sure that our children learn about the mighty accomplishments and achievements that occur in the African American community every day. They won't get that from mainstream media. We got to tell our own stories. And we can't allow others to have black-owned entities in our community that's not owned by black folk. Once again, that's sending the dollars out of the community. And we cannot continue to ship our dollars outside of our communities. I say all the time that you have to teach your dollars some sense. We have to close ranks. We have to build our own economy. You know, the African American economy is probably one of the top 10 nations in the world if you combine all of the wealth that are controlled by African Americans, and yet we last in everything, in healthcare, in education. We're last. We're the most locked up people in the world. There are more African Americans incarcerated in Mississippi than any place in the country. Mississippi would be looked upon as the most corrupt, deadliest state in the world if you look at the prison population that we have compared to others on a per capita basis. Even in the city of Jackson, Mississippi, which I love dearly, we were noted as one of the most dangerous cities in the world 2 years ago, second only to St. Louis, with over 154 murders in Jackson, Mississippi. So you see, we got a lot of work to do, and we got to help doing it. So I've asked my distinguished co-host to let's talk about who are the influential people that should be bringing about a change in the conditions of black folks in Mississippi. And I would bet to say that it will apply to black communities all over the world. So Dr. Henderson, we realized as a boy when we came along, we had influential people. Most of the time we refer back to Malcolm and Martin and Du Bois and Booker T and Frederick Douglass and Newton, Stokely Carmichael. We refer back to people like that as influencers. Today, who is influencing the African American community?
Well, to be factual, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time, we don't have any what I call positive black influences in Mississippi that I know of. Now, we have a lot of blacks that have influence, but if you are not an influencer, you are almost totally worthless. You are just like a beauty queen that's dressed up and ducked out, but she has the intelligence of a warm rat. You will find that when you have people like that, they are usually chosen for their non-productivity, even though they might have the brain of a genius.
Now, I want to cut you off, because I want to go back and come back through that. I want you to unpack that again. We have influencers that are not influencing.
That's right, exactly.
And they are totally
worthless as far as the upgrading and promotion of black leadership in religion, in economic development, in education, and politics.
So then, who is influencing the community? If the influencers, those with capacity, are not influencing the community, and you describe them as some type of beauty contest, someone
beauty queens.
A beauty queen.
That's looking good on the outside and has no ability to make a decision on anything other than what she is told, and then she starts smiling and grinning when she is told that she is beautiful.
Okay, all right. So do we have a lot of beauty queens?
Yes, we do. Well, we most certainly do. And I know we have a lot of them in politics. We have a lot of them in leadership positions in the legal circles. We have many former educators that I know that are superintendents and on school boards, and those people have no responsibility other than maintaining the status quo. The people that put them in office usually were just a handful. If they were voted in office, if they were selected, they were selected by state leaders. They were put on various commissions and boards on the state and regional level, and some of the local politicians use the same strategy to get people on office that have high visibility in the community, but they never contribute anything that was positive. For instance, they never had a business. They never managed a business, never hired anyone. Always worked on a public job with the city or with the state or in education or worked for the federal government. Now, you know those people don't have any decision-making responsibilities. It's like in the military. All the orders come from above. And when you have your appointed people that are in positions on leadership on the local level, that's been appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Speaker of the House, and other commissions and delegators who have the responsibility to do what they are told from the higher-ups, they always get someone that's not going to rough the boat too much.
So are you saying that anyone who is receiving their pay from a state agency or institution is void of leadership skills or influence in the community?
Well, now the thing is, that's a little difference. Many of them have the leadership skills, but they're afraid to use them. Everyone knows that when you are getting in a position where you have a little influence, if you're a good potential influencer with the ability to really do something constructive, the human enemies of mankind going to appoint you to a position, give you a decent salary, and give you, and I've told you this many times, your marching orders or your responsibilities, the guidelines you're going to have to follow.
So why would anyone trade in the ability and the opportunity to influence history and the outcome of what happens to their people for a job?
It's usually because of that visibility and the sense of importance and the fact that they make a financial gain, but their relatives don't, their friends don't, their neighbors don't. You get a man, for instance, he might be a retired Supreme Court justice, was a good lawyer. He got appointed to be a judge. He didn't have to run the first time. I'm just using that as an example. So this is the legal mind that all the legal scholars in Mississippi will go to. When they need some advice, they'll call this person. When they need someone to serve on a commission, when they need a retired judge to go and do some extra work, those are the kind of people they hired to do that because they went to school together. They gave them a position in the legal world. Usually they were appointed. Then they would run and win because the opposition wasn't known. And those people are beholden to the state and the state leadership.
Now, Doc, I grew up in a household where my daddy was a civil rights advocate and an entrepreneur. My mother was a school teacher. She'd be scared to death every time he went out the house because he was going to create an environment that could get her fired. And we lived in that house with that conflict there all my life. And so mother was worried about how am I going to feed my children and my family and create a standard of living that was decent and in order. And my father was talking about we need to free our people. We need better conditions. We don't need to be going to inferior schools. And she was scared every time he opened his mouth.
Well, you're very fortunate to have that controversy in your life. I was just the opposite. We didn't worry about anything. We owned a plantation. We didn't worry about money. We didn't worry about food, clothing, or shelter. We always had a job, and anytime we needed something, my dad could go and get it, and we just didn't know what was going on. So those first 17 years of my life, I thought I was living in heaven.
You saying that blacks on the plantation didn't worry about anything?
They didn't worry about anything, and I'm talking from experience, because your parents will say, yeah, we don't have anything for Christmas. Children, they call us children. We're going to go down to the big store and get you what you need. And they would do that every Christmas, get us an apple, an orange, 2 or 3 pieces of candy, and some marbles. And that's about it. And we were happy.
Well, why would blacks want to give all that up then if it was so wonderful in terms, and I don't mean to say that you were saying it's wonderful, that's just the reality of
That's
what
right.
it was.
When you don't know any better, it is. You can go to bed at night and not worry about your family starving to death. You didn't own your land, but you made the produce that you could feed yourself with. When you gave the owner his, you kept a few. You talked about those potato pumps that you all had. We would keep some of that. We would get some, kill some animals, had a big old storage out there with hams and all kinds of sausage.
Was that called a smokehouse?
That's right, man. And if you ate all you had, you can go to the neighbors. And then if you ate what the neighbors had, you can go to the big barn, and they had hogs hanging up in there 200 and 300 at a time that were smoked. And you can go and get a whole ham, a whole hog, and they put it on the book if you had all your meat eaten before Christmas, and you get you a pig, and they put it on the book for $15. When you got settled, you paid $40 or $50 for that pig. So wow. My folks never worried about anything, and the neighbors were the same.
Well, I'm glad we came through that period, and now everybody has an opportunity to control their own destiny based upon the drive and the quality of life that they aspire to have. Now, we're supposed to have that inalienable right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we're supposed to have. That means you got to get up off the plantation, you got to get up off the farm, and you got to make your own way. Now, what you're saying is those individuals that chose to take state-elected state positions that are receiving paychecks and direction from the adversary cannot be an influencer in the African-American community.
They cannot. And the reason being is that most of the black people that know these people, they have watched them from the early days. For instance, at my age, I know all the black leaders in the state when they were in their 20s, some of them teenagers, and now they are 60, 70, and 80 years of age. And I've been knowing them many times when they were just young boys like me. But in most cases, those leaders had an advantage. Most of them lived in the cities and the little towns. They didn't live on the plantation. Their family members had little businesses. They sold whiskey. And some were stealing cotton and watermelons and selling them, and corn and stuff. They were, I call those independent entrepreneurs.
There's always been an underground economy in the African American
And many times it was your deacons, the leaders in the church, the principal, stealing gas out of the bus. So he could buy him a nice car. He never had to buy any gas. The school teachers drove the bus a lot in the community. And then the community man, the farmer would drive the bus. So most of them would put a bus beside the house and get a 5-gallon worth of gas every night. You see, wow. They didn't have a lot of strict accounting during those periods because the superintendent knew that if you start putting strict accounts there, you can catch him stealing gas or selling books or selling other equipment to other people in the community that he was overseeing.
Now, Doc, the influencer then, we've ruled that class out.
That's right.
What about elected officials that are elected by their constituents, by African Americans? Or are they able and free enough to be influencers in our community?
Well, they are, but there's one reason that keeps them from being an influencer. They have no accountability, and they're not afraid of the few people that put them in office. I told you in some precincts, 13% vote, up to about 33% in some. So now if you're going to have 70% of your people not even voting, you're most certainly not afraid of them, and you're not going to do anything until you serve 3 years and a half. So when you serve 3 years and a half in your four-year job, you're going to start proclaiming that there's a lot of problems in this city, in this county, and I'm going to solve them, folks. I need 4 more years. You said the first time you got elected, the same thing. And matter of fact, all you do is get the same push card, change the dates on it, and send the same people that you didn't pay that minimum wage to push those cards for you in the community. And you are smart enough to know who your voters are. You go to their homes only. You don't have no voter registration because you don't want to mess up the people that's already asleep and wake them up so they vote against you or vote for you. So you just leave them alone. So you're constantly in office until you get sick and die. And then if you don't die first, if you know you're sick, you're going to have your son, your daughter, your cousin, or one of your good friends to take your position. This is the way it's done in Mississippi, in the South, and in the nation.
Wow. So why would an individual want a job as a city council person? I understand the job pays $300 a week. Why would any individual want that assignment?
Oh, that's a great position.
Why?
See,
Why?
I'm going to tell you, most people that in politics on the lower level always want to rise to the next level. I've known a lot of them throughout the years. When you get on the city council, you have the following objectives. You want to be mayor. If you know you have a strong opponent, you say, well, I don't want to be mayor. I'm going to get in the legislature. I'm going to go to the House of Representatives. If you have somebody in your area that's sort of strong, you say, well, I'm going to run for the Senate. And after 3 or 4 terms as the city council, or 3 or 4 terms on the supervisor position, you usually want to go to the legislature. And then later on, you decide if you're loved by the human enemies of mankind, you go and talk to them about running for a regional job in state politics.
But you got to be loved by the human enemies of mankind.
Right, the people that control the money, that control the power, therefore they control you. All aspects of your life from birth to death. So they are not afraid of those kind of people because they have worked with them in various committees. They know they can easily compromise. They can be compromised. They usually have something on them that they can use against them if they don't follow along with the rules that they expect. But they pay those guys well. But one thing I've noticed, Mr. Socrates, these type guys don't ever get visible support. No visible support from their so-called white friends. But we all know they give them contributions to put in their campaign, but you don't see very many on the radio, hear them on the radio or TV, advertising and promoting this person in his position. You don't do it, but you can get that same person to advertise and promote you and take you all over the black community 24 hours a day close to election time.
We're up on a station break. We're going to come back and we're going to continue to deal with who is it that is influencing the African American community. Now, we ruled out those that have state positions that work for their check from the state of Mississippi, and we have ruled out those that are in elected position, that they are compromised in many ways and are not saying anything and are not influencing the community. We only have 3 groups left that we're going to talk about. That's going to be the Christians. That's going to be the businessman, the entrepreneur, and that's going to be the criminals. Those are the only 3 groups left that we can find some deal of leadership and influencing that we can have in our community. We're going to a station break, and we'll be right back.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in a city that's in turmoil. We have a lot of fights going on in Jackson. We're fighting House Bill 1020, where the state of Mississippi is attempting to invade and take over parts of Jackson and control the Justice Department inside of Jackson. We're fighting the takeover of our water plant, our drinking water. We're fighting to take over the airport, another one of Jackson's assets. So there are a lot of things going on in Jackson, Mississippi, and we got a lot of turmoil. But in many cases, only time change can come is when you have turmoil. So here lies an opportunity for African Americans, which represent 85% of our city, to stand up and make a statement on how they're going to be governed and how they're going to be ruled. But in order to do that, you got to have some groups of people that are influencing other African Americans and giving them the strategies, much like their marching orders, on what we ought to be doing. Now, I've been talking to Dr. Henderson about leadership and influences in the African American community. Now, we ruled out that we're not going to get that leadership and that influence from people that have state jobs. If you got a paycheck that's coming directly from the state of Mississippi, you're not going to be allowed to be an influencer. You're not going to be out front. You're not going to stand up, and you're not going to call anybody out that you see that's doing wrong against our community, because your job won't allow it. I'm not hating on that. It's the condition and the requirement of the position, according to Dr. Henderson. And I know it firsthand because it was the requirement of my mother as a school teacher. She was not allowed to attend civil rights meetings. She was forbid from being involved. And bless her heart, my daddy was advocating every day, and she was just in turmoil most of the time. However, we have ruled out that African Americans that are elected by their own constituency are not likely to be your influencers. Dr. Henderson has said that most of them are compromised in many different ways, and they sit and do absolutely nothing for 3.5 of their 4-year term. And then just before the end of that 4th year, they sent out their push cards back to the 13% of the people that elected them in the first place to re-elect them again, and they do absolutely nothing. Then we also discussed, why is it that anybody would want? Why would a young African-American male in the prime of their life want to have a position that pays $300-400 a week? You got a family of 2 or 3. How in the world would you want to do something like that? That's too great a sacrifice in the prime of your life where your greatest earning power is. So we know that you can't rock the boat and can't make those tough calls. So that leaves us with only 3 groups left as to where we get leadership from. Now, we've identified those 3 groups as the Christians, the entrepreneurs, and the criminals. And so, Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
Out of the 3 remaining groups, where are we most likely to get leadership from?
Well, the most influential leadership we have, that's negative, that's almost not significant to the point where you ought to not talk about it at all, and so forth. That is in the religious community. Mississippi has some great ministers. They have ministers in this state and in Jackson specifically that have thousands of members in their churches, 2,000 and 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. You have leadership so high in this state. Matter of fact, Mississippi has one of the highest elected leaders, black leaders, in the United States of the Baptist group. You have the Church of God in Christ leadership, bishops and others that have regions. They have got 30 and 40 and 50 churches assigned to them. I talked to one the other day, last Friday. He has 100 churches under his leadership. You have the other black leaders that are church people. They don't talk to each other. They don't form any coalitions together to fight anything economic, education, or leadership training. They handpick their preachers that's going to succeed them. The bishops do the same. When I attended the seminary, I noticed that years ago. Those guys in the seminary and the few ladies that were there would always cater to the deans and the bishops and the elders of the institution. So when they graduated, they got churches that were significant enough where they can get 1 or 2 of them, because they got appointed, and they could live. When I finished the seminary, they offered me 2 churches, one in the Delta and one in another part of South Mississippi with less than 20 members. And I would have had to go there on my assigned days, live in a hotel on a Saturday night, work with those folks Sunday, go to dinner when I leave there from some of the membership, and then come on back down to Hinds County. And my wife didn't go for it, so I didn't accept that position. Because I didn't have to do it. I had other things going on. But a poor preacher will do that and compromise his integrity and do whatever he has to do to get moved up in the leadership structure. And when the bishop sees, or the head of the religious denomination see these weak preachers and these weak sisters, that's who they're going to put in those responsibility jobs. I call them responsibility jobs that going to serve as a gatekeeper to keep that top leader in his position, because many of those people in the top leadership, Mr. Socrates, getting 5 and 6 different checks every month, thousands and thousands of dollars. They're getting free transportation, free health insurance. They have a housing allowance. They are doing extremely well. And they are surrounded and protected by young people, young preachers, young elders that's going to protect them and do whatever they say. You can't talk about politics. You can't criticize the enemies of mankind. You're not going to do anything controversial. And I'm going to even tell you, since you're close to me, you can't even get a divorce. You just ignore things, because I don't want my reputation attached to bad leaders.
Now, Christians, we're dealing with that group. Now, in Mississippi, and in particularly in Jackson, we have some of the strongest religious leaders in the country.
Exactly right.
We have the Southern Baptists.
That's correct.
Okay, and actually the national president is here in Mississippi.
Jackson, Mississippi.
In Jackson, Mississippi. That's Pastor Jerry Young.
Exactly.
He's the national president.
With over 12 million members. He has members in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, all over the place. They have millions of dollars, millions, every week. They select millions of dollars, and you don't see this gentleman too often on TV, on YouTube, on radio, advocating for anything.
Well, is that because you have a separation of church and state, or is that because that position is flying at a higher altitude than the issues that we're dealing with in our community? What is it that would keep them from getting engaged?
Well, see, you usually, when you get in that position, you're sort of like the current leaders in our state governments in Mississippi and other states. You're so high. You're flying like the eagle, but you don't have those sharp eyes to see the rabbit on the ground. So when there's these big black leaders that have all this influence, all this money, all these people working around them to do what's going on, they don't live in the black community. They live in the suburbs.
Or you're talking about T.D. Jakes and Creflo Dollar?
All those kind of folks.
Those kind of folk.
That's right. They don't live where the people are that they serve. They did, usually, when they were young ministers, but they moved out of that area. And the white folks did the same thing because they controlled most of the cities, population-wise. So when they started going to the suburbs, they left their nice churches there, and they had certain preachers that they can sell those churches to and finance it themselves. Because they would tell a preacher, for instance, Reverend Henderson, I'm leaving, I'm moving to Madison, or I'm moving to a suburb on the coast, and I have a church that has the capacity to fill to hold 3,000 people. Now, it's not but 75 years old, but I want you to have it. The Lord told me to call you first. I want you to have it. And you will say, that must be important.
You must be.
Now, this man want to give me a church for a little nothing. He won't even tell you that you have to go and get it inspected or get an appraiser. They will tell you openly. I know for a fact. We'll let you have this church for $300,000. You tell me how much you want to pay a month, and we'll let you have it because we're going to finance it. But you got to tell us in 30 days because we got somebody else that might want it.
But you won't be able to be active in the local community
You're
affairs.
not going to be active in the local community.
Well, I don't want to just label here and deal with just Pastor Jerry Young, because we have my Bishop Ronnie Cruder.
That's right.
We have Bishop Dwayne Pickett out here. We have Bishop Thomas Jenkins out here. We have Bishop Greg Divinity out here.
And
we have a great number of great preachers.
Great men, but they don't have a lot of leadership that they're exhibiting. They are smart. Many of them have PhDs, all kind of doctorate degrees, master's degrees in divinity and all kind of things, but you don't hear them out there on the forefront like Jesus used to be. He was running around everywhere, going down in the valleys, up on the mountains, going down into the inner cities during his time, talking to the rich, talking to the poor, telling the politicians they got to straighten up and fly right. And if they didn't, he would put a whipping on them. You know the history of Jesus, what he would do when he would go in those places. And he would talk to the sinners and the good people alike and say, you got to do the following. Follow these commandments and you'll be saved. Love me first. Love yourself second. Love your family. Love your community.
So we're not getting that from our current group of leaders in that group.
Especially in the leadership positions for these preachers and these politicians.
Well, let's move on quickly. We're running out of time. So what about the group and the criminals? The highest crime rate in the history of the state of Mississippi is currently occurring every day, and crime is out of control. We have a new police department that's being installed inside of the city that wasn't elected, wasn't chosen by the people that they're serving. And so the criminals are gaining a lot of national attention with all of this crime and corruption and theft and things that come. And so are our leaders to come from that group?
That's where the leaders are. See, those are the real leaders because they control the politicians and many other people. To give you an example, I used to be a police officer many years ago when I was much younger, and I have told this true story many times. We were told in orientation who the drug dealers were. During that time, whiskey in Mississippi was illegal. Who the whiskey makers were, who the men and women that would buy and steal and sell stolen goods, who the wife beaters were, and who the others were doing whatever they were doing. They had good contact with the police, and we could not arrest those kind of people. And if they did something that was overtly wrong, we would have to call the police chief and tell him what we're going to do. And we will be told whether we can arrest this person or not. Now, this person better not be one of the white youth that was in the community. You most certainly, if he didn't kill anyone, you had to let him go and send him home and tell the police chief later on when you got off duty. He didn't work on the weekend. I worked on the weekends, and he would take it on Monday in your report. And those kids couldn't be arrested. You had to call the parents or just send them home.
So criminals have more influence over our elected officials than any other group?
Of course, because they have a bonding. Since we knew at that time who the criminals were and all the other people that were dealing in what we call illegal activity, we couldn't approach those folks. We would turn them in to our leaders, and they would deal with them. And we didn't know all the consequences, but we know from time to time we would be told that you got to go and raid them Sunday night or Saturday night. We'll go down and raid them, take a little whiskey, get a little dope, and send them on to the sheriff or the county mayor or whoever's in charge of those people in those areas.
And they'd be back home the next day.
They didn't go to the jail. They were not locked up. They would be booked, and they would go back. They kept the whiskey, kept the dope. I don't know what they were doing with it. And they never stayed in jail a night. But we found, and everyone knows it, that they were warned that we were coming for a raid Saturday night. So they'd leave a little drugs, a little whiskey out, and we'll get it and going back. And that time, we were making a minimum wage with no decision making and had to follow orders just like we were in the military if you wanted to keep your minimum wage job.
So are these principles in place today?
They are in place today in most states. And you will find cases on TV right now called the Murdaugh case, Alex Murdaugh, D-A-U-G-H, I believe. He was accused of killing his son and his wife. He was a trial attorney, and his job was to help the people when they had injuries. He is on TV now saying how much money he stole from his clients. They will get a settlement, and he said if they got $4 million, he told them we got $300,000. He will take that. He was on drugs for many years. He was writing checks for drugs, sometimes $50,000 a week. And he was alleged to have killed his wife and son, of course. He said he didn't do it, but they have evidence. And in just a few days, that case is going to be settled. And I guarantee you he's probably going to be found guilty because the evidence is there. But these are the people that messed over this man because it took a year for him to be arrested. And when it was revealed that some of the sheriff, the police, and firemen and others in high leadership positions and lawyers were running around with this man and his gangbangers, going to parties and smoking dope, taking pills, and coming back putting on those robes and police uniforms the next day. So they didn't investigate him very closely until they found tapes and other evidence that proved that he was at the scene.
Now,
They protect each other.
We're running out of time. We're going to have to deal with this when we come back next week, because we have not decided yet exactly where the leadership from the African American community is going to come from. Now, we see that the young people, especially African American males, are in trouble. And that's where all of the killings and the murder and the crime is occurring down in the young African American males arena. And we believe that that is probably some of your brightest people that we're losing, individuals that have skills, just don't have direction, don't have the leadership, don't have a general to say that this approach is wrong. But yet, everybody else seems to be in some way that we've talked about compromised by quality of life issues and things that they'd like to have for their family. So when we come back next week, we're going to talk about how we raise up leaders and where we get them from. Now, Dr. Henderson, would you like to have any final closing remarks for this evening?
Well, one thing I would like the viewers and the listeners to know, that even though we talk about some dire times, that things are very bad in Mississippi, in the nation, and the world, I will conclude by saying we are our greatest enemies as black people. We have the power, the ability, the resources, the leadership, and everything we need to solve our problems. And we can start doing this in 30, 60, 90 days if we would pool our resources, create our own leaders, ladies and gentlemen, within our community, and not look for outsiders, especially the preachers and the elected politicians, to leaders. Create your own, put them responsibilities, give them responsibilities where they're going to be responsible and be working for you and not for the outside agitators and the human enemies of mankind.
Well, now you heard it here on WeBelieveDigital.com. We're broadcasting from an African-American owned and operated studio. We'll be back next week to continue this dialogue until we identify where the African-American leadership is going to come from. And we hope to embark upon a program that identifies the top 50 most influential African-Americans in the state of Mississippi. You stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're